Now, Lady Cathy Ferguson, the wife of the former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson, and the woman he called his bedrock, has died at the age of 84. A Glasgow native, Cathy Holding, met her husband-to-be whilst they were working together in a typewriter factory in 1964. They were married 2 years later and went on to raise 3 children and 12 grandchildren over a course of a relationship that lasted for more than half a century. For reaction to this very sad news, I'm delighted to welcome television news journalist and the author of The Boss, The Many Sides of Alex Ferguson, Michael Crick. Michael, thank you for joining us at short notice. Just how important a figure was Lady Cathy in Sir Alex's life?
Well, very, very important indeed. And the fact that the marriage lasted more than 50 years says it all, I think. I mean, Alex Ferguson, inevitably, during his time as a star in football, will have met many glamorous women, very many women who are perhaps more sophisticated. But throughout that time, he was utterly devoted to Cathy. They had their ups and downs. They had their rocky moments. But he owed her a huge amount. She basically is the only woman probably, or the only person that he was, I think, frightened of, terrified of. And she ran the home when Ferguson was out often night after night after night, not just managing his football clubs, but in the 1970s. He also ran a couple of pubs. And if he wasn't going to football matches all over Scotland, he was making meals in his bar, Fergie's, and she barely saw him apart from on Sundays. And it was her job to bring up the 3 young boys who all went on into successful careers. She was a formidable woman. I met her once, actually, at a party, and we had quite a conversation. The trouble was that her Glaswegian accent was so strong that I could only understand about half of what she said. But she clearly was a very formidable woman, and she played a huge role in his career, actually, at key moments when he might have moved, to go and play football for Nottingham Forest in 1969, or later on, Ferguson agreed to go and manage Tottenham Hotspur in 1985. It was a deal. He did it with the Spurs chairman. And apparently Cathy Ferguson said, no, I don't want to go and live in London. We're staying here in Aberdeen. And it was only the following year that she was persuaded that by the compromise of going to live in Manchester. But even then, when Ferguson got new jobs, he was often away. He was away for 9 months living in Manchester before she came down with the boys. She was, she didn't like football, really. She very rarely went to matches. She thought it was a trivial game, and I suppose she was right. And, at home, I think she was the boss. And, of course, everywhere else, Sir Alex was the boss.
Well, indeed. Briefly, if you can, Michael, just to touch on the religious divide. Sir Alex Ferguson faced prejudice, didn't he, for his choice of Cathy as his wife, because he was a Protestant and her family were Catholic.
Yeah, they got married in a registry office in Glasgow in 1966. In the morning, Catholic and Protestant, very controversial in those days in the highly charged and bigoted atmosphere of the west of Scotland. And he went off to play football in the afternoon and then went off to a European fixture with Dunfermline the following week. But when he was at Rangers a year or two later, there was a lot of Glasgow Rangers, an incredibly bigoted club in those days. They hadn't had a Catholic player since the First World War. And a lot of the directors and people at Rangers and the fans were deeply suspicious of Ferguson himself for marrying a Catholic. And his time at Rangers was probably the worst part of his entire football playing career. And eventually he had to leave. That was the atmosphere in Scotland at that time. Because Ferguson was not, those kind of prejudices meant nothing. He was very angry about it. But it was a terribly unfortunate incident. But, he himself, not only did he marry Cathy, but his parents and his grandparents had also had marriages that crossed the divide, which is, quite unusual for that for Scotland in those days.
Indeed so. Look, and I've only got a couple of seconds, Michael. Great to have you on the show. Ultimately, this relationship was underpinned by a deep mutual respect and deep love.
Indeed. And it was very touching, really, the devotion he had to Cathy. And, when but she prolonged his career at United, thank goodness. He announced he was going to retire in 2002. And she said, I don't want you at home mooching around and moaning all the time. Get back to United. And he did, and he gave the club another 11 years, and they won the league about 6 times and the European Cup again. So she did a huge amount, actually, to make Ferguson into the legend that he became.
Michael, come and see us again in the studio soon. My thanks to Sir Alex's biographer. He has written The Boss, The Many Sides of Sir Alex, which is out now. It came out a few years ago. Michael Crick. Thanks, Michael.